So if you just unboxed the Sony ZV-1, then you probably are trying to figure out what do you need to change when it comes to video. Now, some of these things you could probably skip ahead if you already maybe have dabbled with your camera some, but if not, then you can go and follow along step by step, menu by menu. I'll put the timestamps down below and there will be chapters along the video so you can follow along with it, but let's not waste any time. Let's get over to the camera. All right, so this camera is fresh out of the box. So I want to go through and set my specific language. I want to enter my date and time. We'll skip ahead and you can do this for yourselves. So once you have your date and time scheduled into your camera, you go through all the things, you'll see a menu that will come up asking you if you want to install the Sony Imaging Edge software. I already have the software on my phone. We won't need it for this particular video because I'm actually not going to be going through how to connect it to Wi-Fi and all that. But if that's something that you guys want, let me know in a dedicated video. Otherwise, let's just go ahead and jump right into menu number 1, tab number 1. So once the date and time is set, the lens will extend and you will be sent to this setting here. And if you notice these icons on the screen, this is not what you want when it comes to your video. This is going to be a photo-based setting, but this is not important for us right now. Go ahead and select the menu option, and that will take us to menu tab number 1. So as I'm mentioning the different menu tabs, this is menu tab number 1, mostly a lot of photo-based settings. This is menu tab number 2, a lot of video-based settings. These are our network settings when it comes to controlling the phone with a smartphone and on, which is super handy. You also have the playback when you hit the play button if you're going to review your images and whatnot. This setup menu is going to be extremely important for us, as well as the My menu. But if you're coming from a Canon camera, then these are this tab setting is going to be very, very indicative to the Canon setup, so it'll be pretty easy to go through. So when it comes to photos, one of the things that I like to do is have the JPEGs on. I will sometimes do RAW plus JPEG just in case I want to do any photo editing, but if you don't worry about it. You also have the fine, extra fine. I leave that there, pretty standard. The only thing that I do change in case I want to do thumbnails with my camera is the 16:9 framing, and we'll go ahead and go over to page number 2. So none of these things are going to be changed. So we go over to page number 3. Now we have this currently set to intelligent auto. And this is where, if you notice, if you hit that mode dial, you'll see some of these. Now for me personally, I don't shoot in the manual here. I want to go over to the video and it'll look like a film style reel. And this is the things that we need when it comes to video settings. So I'm going to select that so that that is there. And this is where we now will go into manual. Some people like aperture priority, shutter priority. I like to do manual because I will control the settings unless otherwise designated. Go ahead and hit the menu option again to come back into your menu, and we'll move on to the next page. So this is a super neat feature that we'll talk about in a dedicated video when it comes to memory recall. But for now, let's go to page 5. So page 5 is going to deal with your autofocus settings. And if you click on it, then you'll see the different ones here. We just need to do continuous. So that's not anything we're going to change. For video, you do actually want to change this. You'll have center, you'll have more focused things like that. But wide is actually really great when you're talking about making sure the things you want to focus are in focus, and some other changes we'll make as well. The face and the eye, you do want to have that on. Of course, for human, we want to have that available, but animal detection is available. So if you are doing anything with your animals, then that may be important to you. I leave the right and left eye selector to auto because I'll let the camera decide. Face and eye frame display is on. Animal eye display is on. And then we'll hit menu because we're finished with this one. Some of these other icons here are not anything that I want to change. I'm just going to leave these as they are and go to page 6. This is not anything that we want to change either. We'll go to page 7. The exposure, ISO, the auto, all of these things, I want to go ahead and start to change these. Now, you can change this as you want with the dial, but this is where you adjust your ISO settings if you wanted to find it in the menu. Otherwise, we're just going to go ahead and hit back button here. The ND filter will allow you to adjust if you're outdoors. I do like to have this on or off, but I'm not going to bother this for now, so we'll leave it off. Metering and face priority, we're going to leave these alone and go over to page 8. Page 8 deals with more photo-based settings, so we're skipping this one and moving on. Page 9 is extremely important when it comes to your white balance. We do not want to have this usually set to auto. What I'll usually teach is a custom white balance, and you scroll all the way down. I like to go ahead and go to the custom number 3, and then I can dial this in using a gray card. But for the purposes of this video, we'll leave this in auto, but that is something if you're doing regular videos you want to change. So the next important thing is the priority set in the auto white balance. I am a person that prefers the ambience just because it tends to make things warmer. As you can see, if you just look at this little icon here, things start to get a little bit warmer, adds more color, just being in a standard profile. And then there is a standard. So I usually would say put your hand in front of the lens and see how it's impacting your skin tones, but I prefer ambience because it's a bit warmer. Now, when it comes to color grading and things like that, it's things that we'll get into in later menus, but the creative style for standard, that's that standard picture profile. You'll have other ones that are available here that, you know, tend to do different stuff. And these are fun to play with. The black and white actually is really nice when it comes to photography. But if I'm not going to be color grading, I prefer standard. Picture effect is something that if you want to play around with this, it's just some fun things that are in the camera. It's not anything that I want to play with, so I'm going to keep it set to off. And picture profiles is when you start to get into color grading territory. And these do have the standard Sony log profiles in here if you decide that you want to color grade. And these are really, really neat when you're trying to use it and makes the ZV-1 super powerful. But for now, we'll leave this set to off. Soft skin effect is on for this particular camera by default, and it goes through a wide variety of ranges. And I am not somebody that's going to use this, so I'm going to leave this set to off. All right, so page 11 here, the focus magnifier. This is usually just if you want to really go in and dial in the magnification, you can click here. That way you know if something is or is not in focus when you're doing something, but it's super helpful. I don't mind that being on for a little bit longer, so I'll do at least 5 seconds there. And if you want, you can increase that magnification from 1 times to 5.3 times magnification. So if we go back in here, you'll notice that it's even closer than it was before. And that's just helpful if you're trying to do any kind of manual focusing and you want to see the fine details of what's happening on a camera. When you're focusing with the lens for any camera, honestly, that's a great feature to have. But 5.3 is a bit too much. I'm going to leave it set to 1. The next setting is going to be the peaking setting. And so I do want to set this to on. I don't like the color white for that use case. I like blue because not too many things are colored blue in the wild or normally. So you can match this against skin tones and everything else. And it does a great job. And then I'm going to set this to high instead of mid. Page 12 is going to be a little bit different than any other camera just about that Sony has because it has product showcase mode. So if you want to enable that, change that to on. That way, when you put a product in front, it will switch from face priority to product that is in front of the camera. So that's super neat. So the movie tab is going to start getting into the movie-based settings, and the manual exposure, we've already set that, so we don't need to change anything there. When we go down here, this is where you now change from 1080p to 4K video if that's what you're wanting to do. So for the purposes of this video, the capture card is 1080p. So unless your capture card can do 4K, when you're connected via HDMI, you want to do 1080p, but I usually will set this to 24 or either 30 frames per second, depending what you want to deal with. But the ZV-1 is pretty cool because it also has 120 frames per second as well. But 24 is a great standard to start with, so we'll go there. High frame rate settings is really interesting as the ZV-1 can get up to 240 frames per second, 480 and 960. Nothing that I want to change here right now. I'll leave these things set as they are. So let's go over to page 2. We're not really going to adjust a whole lot. There's some really neat things that are here, but this is pretty much the autofocus drive speed. We're going to leave that set to fast. The autofocus tracking, we're going to leave that to responsive. Everything is going to stay here. Let's go on to page 3. So page 3, we're going to go down to the audio recording. You do want to make sure this is set to on so that your audio recordings actually work. Now, because there's no microphone plugged in, I usually know that I'll want a microphone plugged in if I'm out and about. Then you can see this is where you want to adjust this. I never want to put this to auto or anything like that. I want to be able to control the audio on the camera. So I'm just going to set it to about 12 and then I can adjust it as I need to. Audio level display should be on so that you can see that, and wind noise reduction by default is set to off, and I prefer to leave that set to off as well. So the only thing that we're going to change on page 4 is the movie with shutter. So even though there is a big record button on the camera, I still prefer to just be able to press the shutter and start recording no matter what use case that I'm having the camera in. Over on the next page, on page 5, shutter type or release without the card, I'm going to turn this to off. I never want to think that I have a card in and it, you know, kind of fakes me out. So I'm going to leave this set to off, and steady shot for the stabilization is set to on. Page 6, we're going to now change this from optical zoom to clear image zoom. If you've heard me talk about clear image zoom, you know that that is amazing. And so that's the only thing that I'm going to change from optical to clear image zoom. Let's go over to page 7. Display button is going to show me the graphics of what I need, of what comes on the screen or what doesn't. And I want to deselect the histogram because I don't tend to use that when I'm recording. I do prefer this one as if I'm punching in and doing that magnification so I can see the entire screen without any icons. So I'll leave that one checked. Display all the info and graphic display is very close, but I only need this one here with no display, and this one here with the leveler, just to make sure the camera is leveled out just in case. So I'll hit enter to save those options. The zebra setting is super helpful if you're trying to figure out if you're over or under exposed, but I'm not going to get into that because it's a little bit more detailed. So we'll leave that saved at off. The grid lines, we do want to leave this on the rule of thirds versus the off. So we'll change that and we'll leave these set as is. The auto review, if you wanted to automatically review your photos or videos, you can. I prefer to leave that set to off. So this is the option that I love to change here, the custom key option, so that you can really make this camera your own. The photo-based settings, I'm not going to get into because not a ton that I would change here. The photo ones, or video ones rather, you can, and you can change these to any one specific setting that you need or that you prefer to use a lot. And as you look here, you can cycle through the various buttons on the camera. And if you are here, then you click over to the right and it'll show you if you want to change even the top button here from what it currently would be, that is set to the product showcase, to something else. But that's all really the custom buttons that you have on the ZV-1. So the more I use this camera, the more I will change these to buttons that I actually would use. For right now, I'm going to leave these set as they are. And it says follow the custom up here. So this is what they're currently set to. This button on the back here, button 1 is set to product showcase, focus standard, drive mode, and ISO. I like to leave those as they are because I'm used to that. And then over here to the right, background defocus kind of does that. I said product showcase before, but that's the background of focus. But you could change it to that if you wanted to, but we already have that saved in, so we're going to leave that alone. So this next option, the function menu set, is actually very, very handy. This top icon is going to be your quick menu that you can go on screen when you are in photos, but I'm going to come down here and think of the things that I really want to need. I always want to be able to change my audio record levels. The focus function is not something that I want to use, so I want to change this to white balance. And this is just easy because it'll say the title of what that thing is, and I prefer white balance. I want to be able to change my white balance even though that's already here. I go in the order of how I usually change things. I don't need to change this. What I do want to change is the picture profiles, usually next. Honestly, on my other camera, I'm going to go down here because that's usually where it's saved, so I just kind of want to keep stuff where it usually is. Let's go over here, change this white balance. So on page 4 of 12 is the picture profile. So I just want to really save things in the order of the way that I would use them. The skin softening, that's fine. Stabilization or steady shot, that's fine that that's there because we have the Sony Catalyst browse that now works with the ZV-1. The exposures and all that stuff, it's like you really just want to go through and what are things that you usually would change. The ND filter is something that you don't see on a lot of cameras, so I like to keep that there. The mode, it's not really anything, but as you discover that you're using something more and more, it's easy to go in here and just scroll through and see what would you want to change this to and what's available, and then make your changes. So you can get very customized here based on what kind of videos you decide you want to record and things like that. So let's go ahead and do high frame rate because I can see using slow motion a lot here. And if we want to change anything else, you feel free to pick what you like. So one key thing here is just to make sure your movie button is set to always record. Otherwise, you would have to be in a movie function type mode only. I want to be able to hit that record button and record no matter what. Page 9, we're not making any changes, so let's go over to the next tab. So this next tab is actually going to be for your network settings. And this is something that you really want to take some time to do. So we'll do a dedicated video around the network settings so that you can connect your phone to your camera. So even if you want to transfer a quick photo or video to your phone, you can do that wirelessly with the app, but we'll save that portion for another video. Let's go over to the next tab. So this is the playback menu. I'm not going to make any changes to any of these. So we're going to go over to the next one, which is dealing with the setup. And so honestly, there's not a ton here that we want to change. You can if you decide if you want to, but I'm not going to. We're going to go to page 2. And here with the power save, I want to go up to the highest amount possible. Power off with the monitor. Yes, as I close the screen, I want that to go away. And here's another thing. It's like I want to change the auto power off temperature to high. Just because it's necessarily saying it's getting warmer doesn't mean the camera's overheating, but you may see that icon under high use. But I've tested this camera out in very hot conditions outdoors in direct sunlight, and it's never overheated, so that's not a problem. Page 3 is where you want to go for your HDMI settings in regards to live streaming. So this is super important. The HDMI resolution, I want to adjust this for myself, and I'll pick 2160 to 1080p. But if you are using a camera where it cannot do 4K or 2.5K or any of that 2K, you want to just leave it at 1080p. So the standard output is 60p or 60 frames per second. I usually leave this set to 60 no matter what I'm using. It's just going to dictate the way it looks just slightly, but I'm okay with that being 60p, but you can change it to 24. For the purpose of this video, the HDMI info display is set to on. If you're planning to live stream with your camera, make sure you set this to off. The next thing that I want to go down here and do is make sure the USB power supply is set to on, because if you hit the trash can icon on your camera, it will give you a definition of what the settings mean if you ever need help going through that. Let's go over to page 4. And again, this is where we set the language, the date and time and things like that earlier. And then if you want, you can change your file and folder settings to adjust it for your initials and things like that. So you can change it if this is important to you. Otherwise, you can leave it set to standard. And this is all we're going to do here and move over to the My Menu. So to be able to add things to the My Menu, I want to go ahead and click Add Item, and I don't need anything that's really photo based. So I'm going to skip past these things that usually would be for photos, but something like this memory recall I am going to use, but I'll come back to that a little bit later. The first things that I want to do is be able to change things, not with the picture profiles, but I want to go and change in stuff around my frame rates and things like that. So the exposure mode, I'm going to add this in for on top here and click add it, because if I want to go from aperture priority to manual, I want access to that. The next thing that I'm going to do is the file format. I'm going to make sure I have that added. And then the record setting, I'm gonna get all my movie based things that I may change on any given day, high frame rate settings. I'm gonna get that added. Now I'm gonna go back a couple screens over to, so on page 4 here, I'm going to add my memory recall setting and make this one of the ones here. So as I'm making changes to things, if I want to save it to the memory card, I can. So once you hit the menu button and you back up some, you'll see that you're on tab 2 of 2. I want to go over to tab 1, and I'll be able to see that I'm in manual exposure, that I'm in 1080p, or I can pick between that and 4K. Or I can change from 24p to 60 to 120. Or if I need to go into a high frame rate setting, then I have access to that. And if I want to save any of these to the memory card or to the camera for the camera to quickly access those exact settings for any of the frame rate setups that I do, that's where memory recall is going to come into play. So now I'm ready to add some other things. I'm going to go over to add item again, and I want to go and be able to add again my audio levels, because even though I can change this someplace else, I want to go through here and grab that as well. So on page 15 of 29, if I go down here to audio record level, that's going to be the last thing that is on my page 1. So if we go back again to page 1, this page is now completely full of a logical, for me, process of how I would go through, make different changes for my camera so that no matter what I'm doing, I have all of the video centric features on one specific page. So another quick feature that I love to add to my menu is on page 22 of 29 is the control with smartphone. Now, since all of the page 1 is full, what I want to do is press the right directional button and I'll start a new page for my menu, which will be tab 2 here. And I'm going to click add it. And then I'm going to go through and actually use send to smartphone function and add that underneath there. Then we'll see the control with smartphone is on page 2. All my video features are on page 1. So now that I have all of the settings set up for video that I want as far as the menu icons change, now I want to go into and get my default settings for the actual video recording portion that I would do. If I wanted to literally start recording with this video, there's a few other things that I need to change. So we're going to go ahead and go and press the shutter button just to go into where we're seeing the image, and we'll see some of the changes enacted on the main screen. So I'll notice a couple settings are weird initially on here. I'll notice that my shutter is way too high. So what I want to do, since I'm going to be recording in 24 frames per second, is to put this at 1/50. That's as close as I can get. Now you can see this image is getting super overexposed, meaning it's getting super bright. And I can also see that because that that metering mode or that meter will tell me that I'm 2+ overexposed. So what I want to do is hit the right directional button and bring that ISO all the way down. So somewhere there about, I just want to get it somewhere in the ballpark of where I would want it. So I was getting ready. So if I was getting ready to record a video, I would go into my function menu, and these are now these icons that we saw that we might want to change. So right now it's in standard, but if I was getting ready to do a video, I would select this picture profile, go down here to 10, adjust this over from HLG to put this in one of the Cine profiles that I've been enjoying using. We can go with Cine 2. We can change this to BT 2020. Super nerdy stuff here, so don't feel bad if you don't need to change any of these. Not BT 2020, it's Cinema. I think that is, yeah. So change that to Cinema. And then you'll have a much flatter picture profile if you have that set to on like this, or if you have standard, all those color details are already there. So that's all the menu settings that I've actually changed for the Sony ZV-1 to get my camera set up and ready to go for video. And if there's anything that I might decide later on that I want to change, you can go back into the My menu and add those settings there, or to the function menu and add those settings there. But if it's something that you want to see more or learn more about with the ZV-1, let me know down in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next video.